welcome. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. So, big news at this hour. Joe Biden finally figured out who his VP pick was going to be, and then he forgot it, and then he remembered again, and then he sort of stumbled, and then he realized it was Kamala Harris. So, woo! Woo! Very, very exciting stuff. Kamala Harris, the senator from California, such a bad candidate that she jumped to the top of the field immediately upon entering, and then completely flamed out in a cataclysmic explosion that truly rocked the entire presidential campaign. Then when she left, everybody was like, oh no, we need more black people in this primary. Where did they all go? We loved Kamala Harris. And everybody's like, no, we didn't. But we loved her. Well, now slow Joe has picked Kamala Harris, which again, I don't actually see the political math on this one. She doesn't win him a state, right? California's going to win anyway. She has no traction in the black community. If she had had traction in the black community, she wouldn't have dropped out before the first primary. Joe Biden has much more traction in the black community than Kamala Harris ever did. She is not moderate. She is not particularly a good debater. She likes to throw kind of single punches and then immediately flee from those punches. She's extraordinarily charmless on the campaign trail. She is weirdly mechanical. Remember that video of her like fake laughing over the Kamala Harris campaign bus, which was then decommissioned and turned into a truancy bus so that she could go back to her job as AG in California and just arrest all the truant students? The vicissitudes of politics. I'm old enough to remember, as you are, I'm sure. I'm sure you're old enough to remember when Kamala Harris attacked Joe Biden as a vicious racist. That was good times. Remember that? That was like a year ago. Well, sadder times. But now they're together again, guys. It's an on-off relationship. Here was Kamala Harris calling Joe Biden an old white racist.
It's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
Oh my God, that little girl was her. And Joe Biden would have kept her from going to school. Evil Joe Biden, who she's now going to run for president with, and then hope that he plots it so that she can be president. Like that's, I mean, let's be real about this. Like she ain't taking the job because she definitely wants to be VP, right? I mean, like, there's only one reason you take that job with Joe Biden. That man is on his last legs. In any case, Kamala Harris, good times. Good times. And then you'll remember right after that, she went out in public and she's like, maybe Joe should apologize to me. For what? You remember this? Don't worry, guys. She's not a rehearsed, mechanical, viciously backbiting politician. Ever. Nope, it's all good.
To coddle the reputations of segregationists, of people who, if they had their way, I would literally not be standing here as a member of the United States Senate, is, I think, it's misinformed and it's wrong.
Should Joe Biden apologize for that?
He's going to have to make that decision. But, you know, let's be very clear that the senators that he is speaking of with such adoration are individuals who made and built their reputation on segregation.
I mean, that is the person. And also she loves him now. They're best friends now, guys. They're just besties. So that's really exciting stuff. I mean, she really has. What a wonderful relationship they're going to have together. What a good time they're going to have. And don't worry, she's not radical. She's not radical in any way. If you say that she's a radical, it's only because you're not being truthful. She's not a radical. Like, for example, she would never say she wanted to ban fracking or something. Like get rid of an incredibly powerful domestic constituency, a major industry in the United States that's actually lowered the carbon emissions in the United States pretty radically. She'd never say that, thus damaging Joe Biden's chances in someplace like, Pennsylvania. Oh, yeah, wait, here she is, like last year on CNN.
There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. So, yeah, and starting with what we can do on day one around public lands, right? And then there has to be legislation. But yes, and this is something I've taken on in California. I have a history of working on this issue. And to your point, we have to just acknowledge that the residual impact of fracking is enormous in terms of the impact on the health and safety of communities.
Also, she would like to ban plastic straws. So that's exciting stuff. And just in case there's other things, like she wants to ban everything, like all the things she wants to ban. She wants to ban plastic straws. That's exciting stuff. Your future president, Kamala Harris.
Do you ban plastic straws?
I think we should. Yes. I mean, look, I'm going to be honest. It's really difficult to drink out of a paper straw when if you don't gulp it down immediately, it starts to bend.
Yes.
And then, the little thing catches it. And then, so we got to kind of perfect that one a little bit more.
So you'd ban it, but rely on innovation.
I mean, we got it. Yeah, innovation is a process, right? You don't just do it. Innovation is a process. But let's.
That crazy laugh. If you loved Hillary's laugh, let me give you Hillary 2.0, the laugh. That's like somewhere between Joaquin Phoenix and Heath Ledger on the Joker scale of laugh. So I'm glad that we got rid of that in the primary so that we can get it again during the general. That's exciting stuff. Also, she wants to create federal incentives so Americans can eat less meat. All this sounds fantastic to me. A non-radical agenda from your pragmatic moderate, according to the AP. Here's Kamala Harris being a pragmatic moderate about not eating meat.
The balance that we have to strike here, frankly, is about what government can and should do around creating incentives and then banning certain behaviors. I mean, just to be very honest with you, I love cheeseburgers from time to time, right? I mean, I just do. And I think that, but there has to be also what we do in terms of creating incentives that we will eat in a healthy way, that we will encourage moderation, and that we will be educated about the effect of our eating habits on our environment. Mm-hmm. And we have to do a much better job of that, and the government has to do a much better job of that.
But at least she's moderate on healthcare. And we know that because she took every single position possible on healthcare. Like all of them. There are no positions she did not take on healthcare. So during the primaries, she first suggested that she was for Medicare for all. Then she was like, I'm not sure I'm for Medicare for all. Then she sort of backed off her Medicare for all thing. And then she was like, well, we shouldn't do Medicare for all right away because that would mean banning private insurance. But let's just kind of like phase it out gradually. So here she was explaining that eventually private insurance will go away.
I believe the solution, and I'm actually feel very strongly about this, is that we need to have Medicare for all. And you don't have to go through the process of going through an insurance company, having them give you approval, going through the paperwork, all of the delay that may require. Who of us has not had that situation where you got to wait for approval and the doctor says, well, I don't know if your insurance company is going to cover this? Let's eliminate all of that. Let's move on.
Well, eliminate all of it. Like, get rid of private insurance. Who the hell needs it? Who the hell needs it except for the vast majority of Americans who like their private insurance? In other news, you remember that time when in an open debate, she suggested that she would ban assault weapon by executive order? That was a good one, too. I really like that one. That was the one where Joe Biden was specifically asked whether he would ban assault weapons, and he said, I can't do that without congressional action. And Kamala Harris did this weird thing where she was like, I guess, well, instead of saying, no, we can't, how about we say, ready for it, yes, we can, What a charmer she is. She is just, what an addition to the ticket. What an addition to the ticket. And the best thing is that she's a unifier. That's the really important thing about Kamala Harris. She's a deeply wonderful unifier, which is why very early on in the campaign, she suggested that she would love to campaign on the basis of identity politics, which is really exciting stuff. In fact, she said that when people complain about identity politics, that's just them trying to shut people up.
This term identity politics, people will use that term. It's like people used to talk about the race card.
Right.
And they'll bring this term up when you talk about issues that are about race, about sexual orientation, about religion. They'll bring it up when we're talking about civil rights issues as a way to marginalize the issue, as a way to, frankly, try to silence you or shut you up.
Is that what's happening here? She's a unifier, guys. She's a unifying, pragmatic moderate. So it's Kamala Harris. That is who Joe Biden finally settled on, which is deeply shocking, actually. I mean, I'm kind of shocked. It just does not seem like a particularly smart pick, but maybe I'm wrong. Joining us on the line to discuss is Sean Trendy of Real Clear Politics. Sean, thanks so much for joining the show. Appreciate it on short notice.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So she was the conventional wisdom pick. I never understood it. I don't see what she brings to the ticket, frankly. She does not bring a heavy level of black support. He skunked her with black support in the primary. She had so little black support that she never really got off the ground. She had this kind of early flare, and then she fell apart. She doesn't bring a state because California was going to go for Joe Biden by more votes than have ever been created ever. She does not bring a real level of political charm to the ticket because she was widely perceived as mechanical and manipulative during the actual campaign when she was running for president herself. So can you figure out for me why he picked her other than he wanted to check black and woman on the Twitter blue check boxes?
Well, I think that's a big part of it. He had pledged that he would put a woman on the ticket. And so that narrowed down his choices significantly. And I think there was a sense that there was a low level of African-American support or an enthusiasm for his campaign. And so once you've narrowed yourself down to women and you figure you need a boost among African-Americans, there were only 4 or 5 choices to pick from, and all of them had their downsides.
Well, looking at the impact on the ticket, I mean, as you say, if the idea was that he was going to boost African-American turnout, I'm not sure where. She wasn't super popular with Black Americans, again, in the primaries. It seems like President Obama stumping for Biden will probably be more likely to raise awareness in the Black community of voting for Biden, or even opposition to Trump might raise that awareness rather than Kamala Harris. She does seem to bring some electoral downsides. I mean, for example, I was noticing in like a 5-minute search of my prior show schedules, I was noticing that, for example, she openly backed banning fracking. Like, I do not understand how that is possibly a good idea when Pennsylvania is up for grabs.
Yeah, I mean, so look, I think Harris is probably the worst or the least bad of the picks. I actually kind of nurse a theory that Biden was ready to go with Karen Bass a few weeks ago until the Castro and Scientology stuff broke, and that's why we got a delay in the vetting process or in the Veep announcement. But you know, you had Susan Rice, who brings Benghazi baggage. You had Keisha Lance Bottoms, who is the mayor of Atlanta. I actually thought Val Demings was a solid choice, but she's just a House member. So there was just not a lot of depth in the pick. But yeah, she's going to open up some avenues of attack on Biden.
So, you know, looking at the future of the race, how much do you think that the Trump campaign is going to focus on Biden per se, and how much do you think they're going to focus on Harris? They've been having some trouble getting their arms around Biden because he's been able to essentially hide in the basement, not do a lot of interviews, be somewhat pat in his answers. Even when he's made a boo-boo, it's been quickly covered up by the media. So even when he said a week ago that all Black people think the same, which is, it seems kind of racist to me, that kind of went away from the headlines after about 24 hours. How much do you think the Trump campaign is going to, load its guns and go after Harris as opposed to going after Biden?
Yeah, Biden's a tough target for Trump, quite frankly, because whatever else you say, the two templates you run against a Democrat are their elitist intellectuals, pointy-headed intellectuals, or they're, liberal fanatics. And whatever you want to say about Biden, he's definitely not a pointy-headed intellectual. And it was hard to pin the liberal fanatic on him because he's always been right dead in the center of the Democratic Party. So I think Harris probably now enables the Trump campaign to paint Biden as further to left than he is. And of course, Biden's old. Everyone knows that there's a reasonable chance that his vice president becomes president. So I do think there's going to be some more scrutiny of the vice president than typical.
Now, on the other side, there have been questions about Kamala Harris maybe not being progressive enough. So it doesn't matter that she's endorsed a wide variety of wild leftist policies. Doesn't matter that she's got, the support of the Bernie Sanders wing a little bit. The fact is that she was pretty unpopular with that wing of the party when she ran in the primaries, particularly because of her law enforcement past, because she started off as a prosecutor in California. She has a long and controversial history of doing things like increasing the prosecution of truancy. And meanwhile, Joe Biden, of course, is one of the chief sponsors of the 1994 crime bill. Do you think that there's going to be any gap that opens up between the progressive side of the party and the Biden-Harris wing of the party on law and order? Or do you think that everything sort of gets patched over for the sake of beating Trump?
Yeah, I think the latter most likely. I think there's probably some people who are disappointed it wasn't Warren. Some people who are probably still holding out hopes for Bernie as the vice president. But at the end of the day, I think their hatred for Trump is so visceral that they would be able to overlook quite a bit in a vice presidential selection.
Alrighty, so Sean, let's look at the electoral map right now. Right now, it appears that the race seems to be kind of tightening, not on a national level. On a national level, it seems like Biden is still up by somewhere between 6 and 8 points in most of the polls. It seems like it's tightened a little bit from when he was up nearly double digits. It also seems, I've been noticing that Joe Biden cannot break 50% with a hammer. He's up at 49. Trump is down at 40, 41. And it's pretty reminiscent of a lot of the polls against Hillary Clinton, where Hillary was beating him by 10 points during most of the race. But she was never able to break 50%. She was just stuck up at 48, 49%. Trump could theoretically finish 4 points back in the popular vote and still win this thing. the same thing could hold true here. And it seems like things are tightening in a variety of battleground states as well, both in Trump's favor and against Trump. Where do you think things stand right now?
I think it has tightened nationally a couple points. Look, a month ago, it really looked like this thing was getting away from Trump, and people were starting to talk about Democrats maybe getting 55 senators, something like that. And so it is significant that he seems to have stanched the bleeding and even made up a couple grounds. If he's down 7 points, 8 points nationally, he can probably lose the popular vote by 3 or 4 points and win the presidency in the Electoral College. And as you said, a lot of these battleground states, the polls do seem to be tightening, and it looks like realistically it's a 3 or 4 point race, which is something I think Trump can make up.
So looking at the map right now, if you are the Biden campaign, obviously you're focusing on Ohio and Florida, but there's also been talk about them opening up the campaign as wide as Georgia and Texas. Where would you be putting your resources if you were the Biden campaign? And conversely, if you're Trump, where would you be putting your resources right now? Because he's got a lot of ground to defend.
If I were the Biden campaign, I would be skeptical about taking Texas until I was pretty sure that I had all my ducks in a row and was going to win and was kind of going for a knockout blow, if you will. I would put money into Georgia, especially since there's 2 Senate races there that you could possibly pad your margin in the Senate and actually be able to get something done as president. But ultimately, this is an election that's going to be won or lost in Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida, and that's where I think the resources have to be concentrated at this point.
Talking with Sean Trendy of Real Clear Politics. So, Sean, looking at sort of your crystal ball, I'm not asking you to call the election quite this early. Is there enough time for Trump to make up the ground to win this election? What needs to change between now and the election for Trump to vault himself back into a reelect bid? And overall, do you think that the Kamala Harris pick helps Biden, or kind of leaves things where they were?
Yeah, I think there's plenty. I think like I said, he only has to make up about 4 points, which is adding 2 points to his total and taking 2 points away from Biden. And I think that's doable. Someone made a comment back in I think it was April, that if the Dow was above 30,000 and unemployment was in the single digits, then Trump wins. And I think that's not a bad way to look at it. If it's clear the economy is improving, if this kind of summer blip we're seeing in COVID goes away and things look okay in the fall, I think there's a good chance he'll be reelected. As for Harris, I don't think she particularly hurts or harms. I think she opens up some lines of attack on Biden. Ultimately, though, I do think people will vote for president and not vice president.
Well, maybe in the end, that's all that Biden could have hoped for out of this pick, considering that he is perceived widely as vulnerable, and he didn't want to give every line of attack to his opponent by picking a Karen Bass. That would have opened up the communist line of attack, which he sort of wanted to avoid. Sean Trendy from Real Clear Politics, really appreciate the time and the insight.
Thank you.
It's Kamala Harris. That is Joe Biden's pick for vice president, because apparently he was still in some sort of induced coma when he decided to make this pick. I do not see the logic behind it. It makes no sense to me. It is a pure play for Twitter blue checks and for the historic veneer. That's all this is. And all the headlines today are a black woman nominated for VP. That's all he was looking for. The problem is that she is not a good candidate. She's a very, very bad candidate. She has a ton of vulnerabilities. Not only that, she has gone after him personally. She said, for example, that she believes accusers that Joe Biden made them feel uncomfortable. Right? She believes his sexual harassment accusers. This was Kamala Harris last year, guys. Last year. Does anyone have a memory longer than that of a guppy? Here is Kamala Harris last year.
I believe them, and I respect them being able to tell their story and having the courage to do it.
Do you believe that the vice president should enter this race?
He's going to have to make that decision for himself. I wouldn't tell him what to do.
She was calling on him. I mean, that's her telling him to leave the race, isn't it? And that's who Kamala Harris is. And yet he picked that. Get a food taster, Mr. Vice President. Get a food taster like ASAP. ASAP. Now, you'll also remember that Kamala Harris was the delightful type of person who had suggested that she would ban fracking, that she would get rid of your private insurance, that she would get rid of plastic straws. She said that she could ban assault weapons by executive order in open debate. She has said in public amicus briefs that the freedom of religion should basically be reserved to the private sphere. That is a thing that she has absolutely said. And she is a disaster area. She's a disaster area. And yet, the media love her. They're going to treat her with kid gloves. Now, here's the thing. They didn't love her when she was running. As soon as she dropped out, then they were like, oh, man, isn't it sad that Kamala Harris is gone? She's awesome. we're going to miss her, aren't we? Well, yeah, no, nobody missed her, but she's back anyway. Is she a radical? You bet your ass she's a radical. Here is Kamala Harris comparing ICE to the KKK.
I do not see a parallel between what is constitutionally mandated as it relates to enforcing the law.
Are you aware that there's a perception?
I see no.
Are you aware that there's a
that
perception?
puts ICE in the same category as the KKK? Is that what you're asking me?
No, I'm very specific about what I'm asking you. Are you aware of a perception that the way that the discretion
I see no parallel.
I'm not finished.
I see none.
I'm not finished. Are you aware that there's a perception that ICE is administering its power in a way that is causing fear?
I mean, that's amazing. That's amazing. So she compared ICE to the KKK, and then she was like, well, I'm not saying that they're like that, but are you aware that there are people who are afraid of ICE? Also, she backs illegal immigrants receiving Medicare, so that's an exciting thing. So everybody's health care should be paid for by the American taxpayer, including people who are here illegally. Here was Kamala Harris saying that to Jake Tapper.
Every individual who is a resident of the United States is entitled to benefits for health care services under this act. Not every individual who's a citizen, but every individual who's a resident. Mm-hmm. So you support giving universal health care, Medicare for all, to people who are in this country illegally?
Let me just be very clear about this. I am opposed to any policy that would deny in our country any human being from access to public safety, public education, or public health, period.
Also, she backs 70% tax rate. So if you think that the tax rates where you live are already too high, wait until you get a load of Kamala Harris endorsing AOC's 70% top tax bracket. This is something she did on The View when Meghan McCain asked her about it.
And she's promoting policies like saying that every single carbon emission in the country, every car, should be eliminated within the next 11 years, everything from a 70 to 80% tax rate. Do you agree that she could possibly, in this ideology of the socialist left, could splinter your party?
No. I think that she is challenging the status quo. I think that's fantastic. I think that she is introducing bold ideas that should be discussed. And I think it's good for the party. I frankly think it's good for the country. Let's look at the bold ideas.
Let's look at those bold ideas, like 70% tax rates. By the way, she was a Senate endorser of AOC's Green New Deal resolution, was Kamala Harris. And that's putting aside the fact that she's an unbelievably incompetent campaigner. I mean, incredibly incompetent. It's also putting aside the fact that she's routinely and viciously Machiavellian. You remember that time she went after Brett Kavanaugh? So there are a few things she did during that Brett Kavanaugh hearing that were just despicable. And during the Brett Kavanaugh hearing, she literally presented Republicans with a letter signed by a woman named Jane Doe, alleging that Brett Kavanaugh raped her in the back of a car. There were no details. There was no explanation of who the woman was. There was no way for them to actually pin down any of the allegations. Harris just passed along that letter. Washington Times reported that. Also, she questioned Kavanaugh in the most nasty possible fashion. I mean, she was awful during the Kavanaugh hearings, lest you forget. Here was Kamala Harris trying to make a name for herself during the Kavanaugh hearings.
The only difference is that you have been accused of sexual assault. How do you reconcile your statement about a conspiracy against you with the treatment of someone who was before this body not very long ago? Do you agree that it is possible for men to both be friends with some women and treat other women badly? Did you watch Dr. Ford's testimony?
I did not. I plan
Thank you.
to. I plan
Thank
to.
you.
I mean, she was just awful, just an awful person. And she does not underscore Joe Biden as nice guy. And she is waiting in the wings, and everybody knows she is waiting in the wings. So, honestly, if I were Trump and I had Biden in a debate, I'd basically just dismiss him. I would. My strategy would be pretty simple. Joe Biden gets up there and he says, don't worry, you're trying to malign me as saying I'm getting rid of Social Security and I'm radical. I'm not. I'm old Joe Biden. And if I were Trump, I would say, I'm not worried about you. I don't think you're going to be around for a second term. I'm worried about your VP. I'd say it straight out. That's what everybody's thinking. The only reason anyone cares about Kamala Harris is because everyone assumes Joe Biden is not filling out 2 terms. And I think they are correct in this assumption. 59% of Americans, according to new Rasmussen polls, think that Kamala Harris will end up as president if Joe Biden is elected. Within the first term, not within 2 terms, within 1 term. Okay, she's a radical. She is extraordinarily incompetent. She opens up so many avenues of attack for the Trump campaign. They must be just salivating at this point. This is a lady who tweeted back in April of 2017, quote, "An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal." She said we should decriminalize border crossings, by the way. And if you think that Trump is going to lay off of Kamala Harris's start in politics, namely the fact that she originally got a career boost by being the girlfriend of Willie Brown, you are wrong. Donald Trump ain't going to lay off that for one single solitary segment. Not for a second. Not for a second. I mean, if you didn't know that, Tiana Lowe writes for the Washington Examiner. She points out that Willie Brown, who spent a quarter of a century as the de facto royalty in California, he was 3 decades as a member of the California Assembly and 8 years as mayor of San Francisco, once carried out an open extramarital affair with a young prosecutor named Kamala Harris. When Harris was 30, she began dating Brown. He was in his 60s. Brown was married at the time. Also, according to reporting from the San Francisco Weekly, aside from handing her an expensive BMW, Brown appointed Kamala Harris to 2 patronage positions in state government that paid handsomely, more than $400,000 over 5 years. In 1994, she took a 6-month leave of absence from her Alameda County job to join the Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board. Brown then appointed her to the California Medical Assistance Commission, where she served until 1998, attending 2 meetings a month for a $99,000 annual salary. So, do you think that Donald Trump leaves that stone unturned? Does that seem like your style? Does that seem like your style? I think not. I have serious doubts. Meanwhile, there is a lot of news on Kamala Harris's long cop history. So the left really is not fond of Kamala Harris because some people on the really hardcore progressive left see her as too harsh in her prosecutions. Reason Magazine has good coverage of this. Reason Magazine pointed out this back in June of 2019. During her 28-year tenure as a county prosecutor, district attorney, and state attorney general, Harris proved quite willing to live up to the epithet that she was a cop. In the public eye, she spoke of racial justice and liberal values, bolstering her cred as one of the Democratic Party's rising stars. Behind closed doors, she repeatedly fought for more aggressive prosecution, not just of violent criminals, but of people who committed misdemeanors and quality of life crimes. Over and over again, Harris went beyond the call of duty, fighting for harsher sentences, larger bail requirements, longer prison terms, more prosecution of petty crimes, greater criminal justice involvement in low-income and minority communities, less due process for people in the system, less transparency, and less accountability for bad cops. All of this according to Reason Magazine. They also point out that she was personally selected for her position at the California Medical Assistance Commission by Willie Brown, who was her boyfriend. And again, that was not the first time he had given her a lucrative state appointment, which is one hell of a way to enter public service. So she went back to San Francisco. She became a DA over there. And there, she apparently started arresting truants. She made a bit of a name for herself by arresting students and then trying to leverage them. According to Jim Garrity over at National Review, Harris pushed for a statewide law in California that lets prosecutors charge parents with misdemeanors if their children are chronically truant. "We're putting parents on notice," she declared. "If you fail in your responsibility to your kids, we're going to work to make sure you face the full force and consequences of the law." You'll remember this was a line of attack used famously by Tulsi Gabbard, the representative from Hawaii, in debates with Kamala Harris. Harris had no answer whatsoever. Harris has been a strong advocate of civil asset forfeiture, which is a bill that would have allowed prosecutors to seize assets before they even initiate criminal proceedings. As San Francisco district attorney, Harris created a program called Back on Track. The program received $750,000 in federal funding, but faced criticism because an illegal immigrant who pled guilty to selling drugs was selected and graduated from the Back on Track program, only later to grab a woman's purse and run her down in an SUV, severely injuring her. So there is a lot of dirt on this lady, like a lot of dirt on her. She also happens to be incredibly nasty with regard to religious institutions. Kamala Harris not only refused to represent the people of California in defending traditional marriage, she also filed an amicus brief, Harris did, on religious liberty in California, in which she suggested that religious liberty ought to be restricted largely and almost solely to the private sphere. which should scare everybody who cares about religious liberty. Terrence Jeffrey, writing back in March of 2019, points out that Barack Obama, in pushing Obamacare, tried to issue a regulation requiring health insurance plans to cover sterilizations and FDA-approved contraceptive methods. This would include for various Catholic businesses and Christian-owned businesses. Kamala Harris wrote an amicus brief in a case called Hobby Lobby. That was a closely owned family corporation that argued that they should not be forced to cover abortion care because they were a Christian-owned company. Kamala Harris was AG of California. She wrote a brief to the Supreme Court. In her brief, she suggested free exercise of religion is a right created by man-made statutes and is a personal thing that should be kept in an inner sanctum. Here's what she wrote, quote, rights to the free exercise of religious beliefs, whether created by statute or by the Constitution, likewise protect the development and expression of an inner sanctum of personal religious faith. Free exercise rights have thus also been understood as personal, relating only to individual believers and to a limited class of associations comprising or representing them. Unsurprisingly, she continued, there is no tradition of recognizing or accommodating the exercise of such inherently personal rights by ordinary for-profit business corporations. Only religious institutions, supposedly, would be covered here. But that is not what the First Amendment says. So she sided against Hobby Lobby. I mean, she's a wild radical. And I look forward to her answering some tough questions. Because Joe Biden isn't. Frankly, I look forward to the debates between her and Mike Pence. I think that she is rehearsed. I think she, honestly, if you're the Trump campaign, you got to be happy today. You got to be happy today. It's a bad pick. It's a bad pick. And by the way, if Biden and Harris enter the White House, then the governor of California gets to pick who the next senator to fill that seat is. So get ready for Adam Schiff or Antonio Villaraigosa as senator from California, maybe Karen Bass. So that'll be lots and lots of fun. It is Kamala Harris. It is Kamala Harris. So, look, here's the good news. America's an amazing country. I mean, the fact is that 2 immigrants came to the United States, one from Jamaica, one from India. They met. They had a kid. That kid could be vice president of the United States. I mean, that's an amazing American success story. Too bad America is obviously systemically evil and racist, according to most of the Democratic Party, because otherwise things like that could happen in America. The bad news for the Biden campaign is that Kamala Harris is terrible. And not only is Kamala Harris terrible, she spent most of the campaign attacking Joe Biden. This is what happens when you let the Twitterverse dictate to you how you should run your campaign, Joe Biden, you idiot. Like, seriously, it's amazing. Joe Biden avoids the big boo-boo the entire race. He avoids the big boo-boo of listening to the Twitterverse. He ignores them. He doesn't give them any credence. He sits in the basement. He shows up just barely alive at the debates. He waits for Bernie Sanders to emerge as the front runner. And then he's like, really? That old commie? And then he wins. And then the one big decision he has left, he picks one of the least popular Democratic candidates in the field, who also happens to be extraordinarily off-putting and radical, but simultaneously pisses off the progressives in the base because she was a narc. So well done, Joe Biden. Very, very solid stuff. Bottom line is that Democrats are basically hoping just to do this and move on. I do not think that is the way this is going to work. I do not think that's the way this is going to work at all. In fact, I think this is going to be the lead point of the attack for Trump's campaign. In a debate with Biden, I think Trump very obviously just goes right for the jugular. I think that Biden says something, and right off the bat, Trump says, you know what? It doesn't matter what you say, because you ain't going to be president. Right? We all know it. The American people know it. You're not with it, Joe. You don't look good. You're already too old for this job. You know, and if they want Kamala Harris as president, then they sure didn't show it before, but you picked her. And so I don't believe your protestations of moderation. I don't even think she needs to push you. I just think she needs to wait. And Donald Trump will say that, and he will be correct. 59% of Americans by Gallup polls believe that Kamala Harris finishes Joe Biden's first term. And it's not an obvious pick. Not an obvious pick at all, frankly. And I'm kind of astonished at Joe Biden. By the way, how radical is Kamala Harris? Kamala Harris is so radical that at a certain point during the debates, Joe Biden was asked whether by executive order he would ban assault weapons. Okay, first of all, it's bad policy. The assault weapons ban was utterly ineffective, and it doesn't have a good definition. But put that aside, Joe Biden at least had the wherewithal to say, yeah, I can't constitutionally just ban assault weapons. And Kamala Harris is like, Constitution? What Constitution? Cue insane Joker laugh. Here is Kamala Harris.
You can't do it by executive order any more than Trump can do things when he says he can do it by executive order. Does the vice president have a point there?
Some things you can. Many things you can't.
Let's let the senator answer.
Well, I mean, I would just say, hey, Joe, instead of saying no, we can't, let's say yes, we can.
Let's be constitutional. We got a constitution.
And yes, we can.
Yes, we can. You ready for a lot of that? You ready for a lot of that? Yep. Remember that time that Kamala Harris was selling shirts on her website that said that little girl was me? And attacking Biden for being a segregationist? That's who that guy picked. That's who he picked. Slow old Joe. You almost feel bad for the guy a little bit. You almost feel bad. Almost. Here is Kamala Harris once more. The only clip that will be played for the rest of the campaign. Kamala Harris ripping Joe Biden as a racist segregationist who wanted to prevent her from going to school.
It's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
Oh, that little girl was Kamala. But now the good news is that they're best friends now, guys. Like, America's an amazing place. What a rom-com this is. It's pretty spectacular. Yay, they're all together again. Woo! Had a weird ending. You didn't see that one coming, did you? And it's a bold move, Cotton. We'll see if it pays off for him. We will see if it pays off for him. I have doubts. I have serious doubts. And again, if you're in the Trump campaign, you've got to be happy today. You have got to be very pleased. He will get one day of good headlines out of this, and then the rest of the campaign, he is going to have to deal with that as his pick. That's going to be the entire thing. Of all the people they decided to pick, they went for the old white guy, the Democrats, and a person the progressives believe is a cop, who happens to be radical and undercuts Biden's claims of moderation. Well, points for audacity, if not a lot of points for brains. Alrighty, we'll be back here tomorrow to recap all of this. We will bring you all of the fallout from Joe Biden's fabulous Kamala Harris pick. And by fabulous, I mean terrible. You're listening to The Ben Shapiro Show.